The bounty hunters. Slytherin's organic eye widens as he looks over the readout of the world they're orbiting over. Only one spaceport in area with communication towers. There was being told that the world you're heading to is a voluntarily primitive one, but it's another to see the infrastructure read out and have it confirmed. He knows logically that he's going to get this feeling again when and if he actually goes down to the world itself. He doesn't always go down to the worlds, but he's been doing it more and more. All right, ladies and gents of the Chainbreaker, we have arrived at Morden 2. Who here has read the information packets? Show of hands, please. Pukey calls out, and Slytherin and several others, all the men, Onyx, Mother Litha, and some others, raise their hands. Okay, a little less than what I hoped for, but more than I feared. So in summary, this is a hot, dry world that was used by several different Begrob and Ledi polities as a prison world. They used enforced primitivism to keep the criminals contained. A series of scandals where political prisoners were sent to Mordonon and numerous protests raised made it so that the world lost its status as a prison planet, and a large amount of first-generation criminals were removed and placed in standard prisons. However, by this point there had been several generations of natural-born residents, and they have continued to life in a much more primitive state than the rest of the galaxy. This is a cultural and, from my understanding, religious point of order. There's a snapping of fingers and Slytherin turns to see the hat with his hand up. Pukey points at him. So you said there was a flurry of jobs here, some old, some not. Why are there old ones? I looked over the data package and it wasn't in there. Right, I've gotten in contact with the administrator of Mordenon's only spaceport. The primitive communities have only recently brought these concerns to her, despite several of the issues being decades or even centuries old, in the case of the mystery of the Shimmer Sands, Pukey explains, and Bike coughs into his fist. Right, and that brings us to a potential complication. We're not the only party in town. At least 3 other bounty hunting crews are already on the planet, and we expect several independent contractors to be present as well, more to arrive. This place just opened up for business, and we're all smelling blood in the water. Slytherin raises his hand and is pointed at. So what do we do if we're on a mission and run into them? Say they're running the same mission? They're not the target, so if they're not in the way, then ignore them as far as good manners allow. If you're clearly both going for the same thing, then try and talk to them. They're not criminals, and we're not savages. If teaming up is an option, then take it, but make absolutely sure you're recording things at that point in case something goes weird. To say nothing of the fact we can learn from them, Pukey answers. One of the Sidewinder girls holds her hand up. What if they want to take more of the mission cash than is fair? We all have constant pay from the Undaunted and get to keep all but a token amount of the mission pay. The only bits we don't keep is just so that paperwork says we're technically doing this legally and in such a way that we're all paid very well on full military salaries in addition to the bounties. These others aren't. A few credits isn't going to hurt us. Getting into a pointless fight with another bounty hunter will, especially as some bounty hunters really struggle to make ends meet. So let it slide with a friendly warning at most, unless they're being stupidly greedy or entitled. If they're desperate, you help them. If they're stupid, you make it hurt. Get it? That, and we've got literally millions of credits in the war chest. Emergency stashes and nest eggs. Not to mention the petty cash alone is enough to outright buy some ships, Mother Litha says, and Slytherin can only smile at her voice. She still made a point of making sure he got a daily allotment of warm cuddles and numerous songs and teachings of Nagasha ways. Of course, Mother Cindy was also beloved. She would dither and worry over him, making sure his prosthetics were in perfect condition, and there was nothing in the way of dysmorphia, and that he was eating enough and taking sufficient axiom in, and 1,000 other little things. Then when she was totally sure, she would hug him and give him a kiss and help him with his homework. He still missed his birth family, but between his new mothers making absolutely sure he was healthy and happy, and his new father ensuring that he was strong and wise, he somehow was having it work with a small but growing family. After all, both Cindy and Litha had laid their eggs and both were incubating well. A lot of these bounties are in more primitive areas. Packs of dangerous animals, criminals that the locals can't track without more advanced tech. Not to mention the archaeological studies where the locals want to understand the old ruins that are in places they struggle to get to, Andrea says. Pardon, but is there a point you're getting to? Pukey asks. What's our weapon loadout? A lot of the locals are primitives that have laser-resistant carapaces. So do we rock weapons on their level or weapons on our level? Do these people even understand the threat of a plasma gun being pointed at them? Would they respect a knife when they're basically in full-body armor, no matter what? Andrea clarifies. We're going with a sort of double loadout, the visible and the backup. In summary, everyone on the ground is going to be visible carrying something primitive and respectable. A warhammer, a large sword, bows, crossbows, maces, axes, that kind of thing. But we're all going to have holdout plasma pistols at the least. Those who train to handle them will have standard guns as well. Finally, as per standard procedures, no one leaves the ship without at least a knife, an emergency beacon, and a pistol. This may be a bit heavier a loadout than some of you are familiar with, but I assure you that you'll want all of it. It's kind of the point we're all here anyways. This one isn't going to pay all that well, but it is going to be interesting. It'll teach us about more primitive peoples in the galaxy. Mr. T adds in, and Pukey nods. That's right. This is mostly about what kind of nonsense we can and cannot get away with. I'm not saying go out and try to lead a revolution against the local clan leaders, kings, or whatever kind of government you find. I'm saying see what kind of response more primitive societies have and how to step around it. We're likely to run into a bunch of weird things. Any other questions? Someone else must have raised their hand as Pukey points into the group. Yes, so what's the thing to do if the locals get hostile? Well, for you, big girl, I'd say smile wide and tell them that the armor only makes them crunchy, Pukey jokes. WW! No, that's just gross. They're bugs, bug people. That's nasty, Jade protests. Slytherin cannot keep it in. You do know that the crab and scuttlers you adored on Lilb Telob or what happens when a bug evolves underwater, right? One of the Sidewinders beats him to it, and Slytherin just sort of slinks down from where he was going to say the same thing. EW! Thank you. Now she's going to gag when we next put Crab in front of her, Airfarce says in a very dry tone. What? No, come on, Dad. I'm not that picky. You know me. I do. I'm just teasing, Airfarce says, and there's some good-natured chuckling. Still gross to think about, she says, and Slytherin snorts. All right, those are all the salient points. I trust you all to be intelligent enough to arm yourselves, so there's only the question of who's going down first and doing what jobs. We've decided to use a rotating random team system. 10 small teams, half on the ship at any time and ready to reinforce the others. They've already been assigned for all our field workers, with only 2 in question. Jade and Scaly, do you 2 want in? Because if you do, you're heading out with your fathers, as there will be at minimum 1 human on each team. In, Jade cheers. So am I. Am I allowed to bring in the new drones? I think they may be a bit much for the locals, Slytherin asks. Bring a couple of your old ones and see how they react. A swarm of drones that combine into a flying plasma mortar may be a bit much to start with. But if drones are in the clear, we'll find some targets you can practice bombarding with. Pukey promises, and Slytherin pumps a fist. He's been itching to try out the big gun mode on the newest model. But it was so big it wasn't something that could be done indoors for fear of turning it into outdoors, which is not something you want when not on a planet. Or at all, really, the backdraft of that kind of damage is no joke. You need a lot of room to not get caught up in it. He gets a view screen seat on the way down. He's rocking 3 rapid plasma launching drones and 2 stealth, observation, and longshot drones. Visibly, he's carrying a large bow that he fully intends to have fun with, and a flurry of knives across a bandolier. He has not only the plasma drones, but a pair of plasma pistols as backup. And of course, his fingers can merge and project a hard light blade as before. He's ready for trouble, or at least looks the part. It's going to be a while until his insides stop clenching whenever there's the prospect of a fight. It doesn't slow him down, but it's another sign he's uncomfortable with it. He's no Apex, no Great Desert Nagasha, not quite so wired for war, but he's getting stronger in body, mind, and soul. He can feel the day coming that someone tries to hurt him and ends up broken on the ground for it. His father is using his heavy backup arm instead of his replacement hardlight arm. mostly because he was going to test the locals to see how they responded to prosthetic limbs. As such, Slytherin was wearing gloves over his hands to hide the prosthetic fingers and had a hat with numerous drapes to help hide his prosthetic eye. He did like that his father was so protective, but at the same time, he kind of hated it too, but he'd go with it. Just in case, the shuttle touches down and they all clear out. Nearly half of the chainbreaker quickly slithers out. The team has him, his dad, and 3 of the Sidewinders. All right, so what's the first move? Slytherin asks and Pukey grins at him. Why don't you tell me? Take the lead, I'm right behind you, little buddy. I hope not. My tail's there. Slytherin jokes even as he scans the area. He's getting the lead? Nice. A bit to the side then. Where are going? Pukey asks as Slytherin finishes his scan. That way none of the other teams are going over there, and while the spaceport has been scanned, the ground level look is smart to have. Topside view doesn't show anything like hidey holes or gang signs. Slytherin explains as he points to the left, then back a bit to avoid the other teams. Good thinking. Lead the way. Pukey says and he does. With his father to his right and a little behind him and the girls following behind in a slithering sync, they quickly start poking around the city. The whole area goes for a lot of domes and arches in its construction with not a lot of paint around the outside. There is, however, a great deal of stone that shimmers in the sun that's been blasted smooth by what had to have been numerous sandstorms on this upwardly dry and dusty world. Apparently, there were a lot of underground reservoirs and rivers that fed the plants whose roots run deep. But most wildlife and people get almost all their water from the fruits of deep-rooted trees, or the other wildlife if they have a bloodier appetite. You could trace the underground rivers by the green above ground, and that's where most of the communities were around. This spaceport was the odd community out in that it had no natural reservoir under it, but it did have an artificial one apparently. So what do you think, Mason's mark or gang sign? His father asks, and Slytherin whirls around to see Pukey pointing at a small cross symbol of 5 circles and a pair of lines crossing all of them with the middle one crossed twice. Good question. I suppose the only way to figure it out is to either find a gang that uses it or the Mason who marks their work, Slytherin says. Or you could ask me, a local says as she leans around the corner, or we could ask her. One of the Sidewinders agrees.